Welcome to the very first Real Talk Wednesday. My name is Erin Callinan, founder of Beneath the Brave, and I'm showing up every week to have some raw, messy, unscripted conversation about the things that people don't talk about and shy away from when it comes to mental health. So today's topic I named It's Probably Just Me. Shame is a Sneaky Little Liar. Now, shame is something that is near and dear to my heart in that it has followed me around in various ways throughout my life. So I've been familiar with shame in different shapes and colors and sizes back to when I was a teenager, navigating college, following that all the way into adulthood. And so I just want to talk about shame and what it may look like, what it may feel like or sound like for you. Now, I can only speak from my experience, but shame typically makes us feel like we are the only ones struggling, or that if we're navigating depression, anxiety, OCD, grief, trauma, loss, whatever that may be, that we should be embarrassed about it. Shame is that voice that just creeps in and tells us we should probably deal with this on our own, that we should keep it to ourselves. It may make us weak if we open up to other people in our life. Well, I call bullshit. I've lived with a mental illness for 23 years, and sure, shame has shown up in my life in many different forms, like I mentioned, but I know for a fact that it's not just me who has struggled with their mental health. I'm not the only person who struggles with bipolar disorder, who lives with bipolar disorder, who has found various ways to live a healthy, stable, fulfilling life despite bipolar disorder. But what happens when shame shows up is it gives us this sense that whatever we've been through, like I said, think about your own life. It may be stress or fear or a mental health challenge. Shame tells you and I that those struggles are embarrassing, that we should be ashamed of it, we should hide away, that we should make ourselves smaller, that we should doubt ourselves. Shame tells us that struggling is like a moral issue, as if it's some kind of character flaw. And in reality, when we struggle, that's just proof that we're human. This is part of the human experience. And I don't believe that it's intended to be lived alone. And so if you find yourself struggling, that means you are responding to something going on in your life. And it does not mean that you are broken, that you need fixing, or that you should feel ashamed for doing your very best in a hard moment. I have felt this shame in so many different ways. And so I want to share a couple of examples so that we can just bring it home. And so in case you're wondering, Erin, I haven't felt shame. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to paint a little picture for you. After I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, that was really sort of the first time that I was introduced to shame at its core, like the really ugly, sticky, greasy shame that seemed to live inside of me. And I took it with me everywhere I went. That shame told me that there was something wrong with me, that I should be embarrassed, that my worth was attached to my mental illness, that I should be ashamed for needing medication, that I should be ashamed that I needed help. Well, I did, and I still do. We shouldn't feel as though our challenges in life must be wrapped up in shame because, we're inherently weak or bad or stupid. But that's the voice of shame. And so if you're navigating tough stuff, whether it's a relationship, it's something going on in your workplace, it's dealing with health issues or challenges maybe your kids are facing or your parents are facing, the voice of shame is really loud. when we try and navigate life alone. And so for me, my shame sounds things like, get it together. Why can't you just deal with this? You're too much, or you're not enough. You're broken, you're damaged, you're beyond repair. What you've been through is ugly and messy, and people don't want to see that. And so over the years, for a while, I'm well past it now. Kudos to therapy. But for a while, I really kind of lived in this space where I felt like I had to hide the mess, and I had to show up with the big red bow around my life and my experiences because of that fear that I would be judged, because of the stigma that surrounds those of us who live with mental health conditions. And so I just want to break down what shame is and what shame isn't. Because a lot of people confuse shame with guilt. And so I want to just clarify that. Guilt is typically, I did something bad. There was an action, I made a choice, I made a mistake, and I feel guilty about it. I feel bad about it. Shame flips that narrative and internalizes it to say, I am bad. Not I did something bad, I am bad. I am a mistake. And when it comes to mental illness, that's a health condition. My bipolar disorder is not something that I should feel embarrassed about because I didn't do anything to cause it. It wasn't based on a mistake, a bad choice. It could be a combination of biology and psychological factors, my social environment. So mental health conditions are medical conditions. It's a brain thing. It's not a bad person thing. We don't shame people for having other types of medical conditions. Think about somebody in your life who lives with diabetes or heart disease. I live with asthma. I'm not at all embarrassed to talk about my asthma treatment. I'm not at all embarrassed that I go to an allergist and I do allergy shots and I do at-home asthma prevention biologic injections, which are life-saving, by the way. So if there's any asthma folks out there, talk to your doctor. If you need a recommendation, I got one. I don't feel shame around those things. But when it comes to topics of depression, anxiety, mania, stress, struggle, grief, any of those things, sometimes people just get weird about it. And so when you think about how shame may or may not show up in your life, a few things that I have learned along the way is when shame shows up for me and it tells me that I'm not good enough, I'm weak, I should be embarrassed, that things are never going to get better, I might as well just hang up the towel. There's no use in trying. I'll never be valued or seen or loved or cared about. When shame starts speaking to me loud and clear, it is painful. And my knee-jerk reaction to that is defensiveness. In some areas of my life, my response is to flee. Okay, I'm like, get me the hell out of here. In other areas, specifically when it comes to my mental health or my diagnosis, which obviously I'm very public about, I can easily get defensive and start kind of battling for my worth. Feel like I have to defend myself and my value. But wait, no, please don't look at me the same way you look at somebody else with my same diagnosis. Please don't read the news and assume that what you're reading speaks for everybody who lives with my condition. And so a couple of examples I can think specifically where I felt so much shame and it came up out of nowhere. Okay, because shame, remember, sneaky little liar. And it doesn't show up knocking on your door and ask for the invitation to come in. Many years ago, I was living in an apartment and I was in the process of ending that lease. I was moving out, and so I was in communication with this landlord. I'd never met him before. They just switched like property companies. So it was my first interaction with him. So he came out to the apartment to, do the walkthrough, make sure I didn't like burn the place down. And at the time, I had a blown up photo that was the copy of my very first book. And I was so proud of it. And, it was about my lived experience of bipolar disorder and how I came to terms with that and how I learned to stand on my own 2 feet proudly and talk openly about the struggles, the good, the bad, the messy, the ugly. And what I wasn't expecting was an email to confirm that, hey, drop your keys off, you're good to go. Apartment looks great. And I saw the book, and I think it's he framed it as something like, I think it's really important that there's people like you to help those people. And so I think he assumed that I was a therapist or a counselor, and I'm none of those things. And so I wanted to kind of correct him from this place of pride. And I responded back, actually, this book is about my lived experience. This is about my diagnosis. And so in your life, if you ever know anybody that is struggling with their mental health, specifically bipolar disorder, I'm a resource. If the book can be helpful, let me know. I'll pop one in the mail for them. And I was addressing this as if it was going to be this like positive, hey, look, she lives with bipolar and she turned out okay. The email I got back from him was so offensive. And it was this long rant that he probably should have told his therapist instead of a stranger who was renting. This rant was all about how, he avoids bipolar people as if they're not people before the diagnosis, but that's another Real Talk Wednesday. He talked about how he just avoids bipolar people because they're scary and unsafe and dangerous and they can't be trusted and they're moody and unpredictable. And he was using all of these words that didn't describe me. It didn't describe Erin. And I think if we're being honest, in any of our lives, there have been times where we've been moody or unpredictable, or we showed up in ways we weren't proud of. And the level of defensiveness was like top tier. So as you can imagine, and if you happen to know me, I'm a little bit feisty. So I sent this scathing email. And it was like, it felt like 17-year-old Erin, who was first diagnosed and carried so much shame about that, with her little hands on her hips, saying, see me as the person and not as the diagnosis. And so that shame in the moment as a grown-ass adult took me right back to being a teenager, where I felt small. I felt embarrassed. And if we, okay, you, I, your neighbor, your mom, your partner, we've all felt shame at one point or another, most likely. If we're not careful about recognizing when shame shows up and how it impacts us, we can fall victim to it. Because when shame is alive and well, oftentimes what happens is it causes us to avoid circumstances out of fear of judgment. If shame tells me that I'm not a good person and things are never going to get better for me and I'll never hold down a job, I'll never get married, I'm getting married and I own a company. So clearly I win. Shame doesn't have the final say. But sometimes we can fall victim to the messages that shame says, stop trying, give up, nothing's going to get better. And what sucks about that is we miss out on opportunities. Because when shame is in the driver's seat, we don't take risks. And sure, there's risky behavior that is not good, could be potentially dangerous. But I'm talking about the risk of just showing up in life, participating in your own life. And so if you find that shame knocks on your door and it makes you feel like you want to hide, pay attention to how you respond to it. Because sometimes that judgment and all that negative talk and the messages of, not something bad happened to you, but you are something bad, it can make us hide. We don't respond to people. We isolate. We cancel plans. We people please to kind of defer attention to us. Maybe we pretend. Maybe we pretend that everything is okay so that we don't have to look it in the eye and face it. And so really what we say is, I don't want to go. I don't want to go to that event, or I don't want to go on that date. But really what we're saying is, I'm afraid to be judged. And for a long time, I remember that fear of judgment because I worried about having to explain myself. I was defensive even before I was in the situation. Okay? I had this anticipatory anxiety that said, protect yourself in case shit goes bad. You've got to have your armor on. Okay? So I'd pretend. And that's just that's a lonely, isolating way to live. And so I hope that we can avoid that, and we can look at shame for what it is and know that it's not a part of us. And that many times when we step back and we make ourselves small, it's shame talking. It's that fear of judgment, the need to defend ourselves. Our worth gets chipped away. At least that's been my experience. So what do we do about this? I want to share some strategies and just ideas of things that I've learned along the way that work for me, that I continue to practice today, because I am a work in progress. And I imagine many of you are as well. And if you say you aren't, I think you're lying. And I could probably ask your partner, your boss, your best friends, right? This is life. This is the human experience, and life can be tough. And so these are things that I have sort of committed to myself, that if I don't want shame to take over in my life, I have a choice. I'm not going to fall victim to it and give it the power, because that makes me play small. And so first and foremost, stop apologizing for just existing. Okay? Stop apologizing for having bad days, for having needs and feelings. And if you're having a tough time, instead of saying, gosh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to burden you with this. Don't over apologize it. Don't over apologize. Reframe it with self-respect of, hey, I'm going through something really hard, and I'm worth the conversation. And thanks so much for listening. Your worth doesn't expire because you're struggling. And so stop apologizing for asking for help. Stop apologizing for struggling. Okay? Struggling is natural. But take your power back and don't fall victim to it, and listen to those messages that say nothing's going to get better, you're bad, something, you're an awful person. Let it motivate you to do hard things. Another thing that is life-changing is simply name it. Identify it. Name it out loud when shame shows up for you, because it thrives in silence. And so if you and I can both have the courage to talk about our mental health and acknowledge how shame looks and feels and sounds, it feels a little less scary. So call it out, write it down, get on your phone, use your notes. You can use the audio feature, so you just talk right into your phone. Spill how you're feeling. Share that with a family member, a friend, a therapist, a coworker. I guarantee you, people are out there waiting to help. Give them that chance. Another thing that's really useful for me is to pay attention to the narrative so that I can change it. So instead of viewing my whatever situation, let's say, for example, sometimes I can have shame around anxiety. Okay, so I'll be, dealing with normal life stuff, and sometimes I'll have anxiety attacks, or I'll be somewhere beautiful on the beach, or I'm traveling. I'm like, life is so good, and then all of a sudden, anxiety shows up just to remind me that it's still there. And so sometimes I can feel shame around that. Like, what is wrong with me? I'm the bad person. Why does this happen to me? It must be because there's something wrong with me. I'm the only one. Because if I'm in a beautiful place with people I love, there's no reason to be anxious. Which, on the one hand, is true. On the other hand, my nervous system is responding to something, whether or not that's based in reality. And that is still important. Whether the fear that I'm feeling is real or not, my heart is racing. I'm sweating. My fingers are going numb. I am reeling with these racing thoughts that, it's nauseating. And so let's take that example, because again, shame steps in and tells me that I'm foolish, I'm stupid. Nobody else goes through this. They don't have panic attacks at the beach. Okay, what an idiot, Erin. You should be so ashamed. Don't tell anybody about it. How humiliating. Instead, I want to challenge and change that narrative. So something my therapist has helped me so much over the years is think about what the shame is trying to tell me. And instead of it being what's wrong with me, look at where the shame is coming from. Is it actually my shame? Is it something that I'm conjuring up, or am I kind of being handed this shame by people around me, by stigma, by other people's beliefs? And so when I can, with anxiety, this is what I often do, when I can kind of take it over here, put it on a shelf, or like hold it, it doesn't feel so close to home, and it allows me to just get curious about it. Why is this anxiety showing up? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And without necessarily judging it or trying to change those thoughts, it's just recognizing those thoughts. But what I can do is I can change the narrative and how I talk to myself about the shame that shows up. Another suggestion I have for you, if you are living with a mental health diagnosis, you are not your mental illness. You are not your medical condition. Maybe you don't have a diagnosis at all, but you could still be struggling with depression. The majority of folks who are struggling go undiagnosed. So either category, this is for you, still applies. Don't let that define you. I'm not a bipolar person. I'm Erin Callinan, who is, a friend and a daughter and a hard worker, and I'm loving and kind and Christian, and I'm all of these things. Bipolar disorder, that's just a part of it. Just like my asthma and my curly hair. They're pieces of me, but it's not all that I am. And so give yourself credit for the person you are, and do not allow a diagnosis to define you. Okay? Make that distinction, because when you do, shame doesn't have a place there. There's not room for shame at the table. Along those same lines, speak kindly to yourself, because that inner dialogue can be cruel. And so if shame is showing up, if you're struggling to reach out for help, or you're struggling to talk to somebody about what you're going through, or maybe you're in that victim mentality, and by that I just mean having this sense of, I have no power, I have no control, there's nothing that I can do about this, and so I'm not going to do anything at all. I'm going to stay stuck. I'm not going to move. Because usually what follows that is anger, resentment, isolation, cynicism, and that's just no way to live. So pause and ask, when you look at the messages you're telling yourself, those internal thoughts, would you talk to somebody else in your life that way? Probably not. Okay, pay attention to that. Another thing that I'll do that, again, I learned in therapy years ago that's still helpful, when I look at shame or thoughts or negative self-talk, I think about, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And so I encourage you to do that. And as you look shame in the face and you stand proudly on your own 2 feet, because we can always win over shame, you're also allowed to find joy and laughter even in the midst of struggle. Okay? It doesn't invalidate the difficult time or the pain or loss or stress. It honors how resilient you are. And it's okay to be fully human, which includes joy and love and laughter and lightness. Now, you may not feel those things if you're in the midst of a crisis. But as you face your struggles, as you push shame out of the way, it's also okay to smile. You know, sometimes people feel guilty once they start healing, that they find themselves laughing and it almost catches them by surprise. Like what they're going through is too bad. They don't deserve to smile or to laugh or to feel joy. And I just don't believe that. And so pay attention to that voice and reclaim joy without guilt in your own timeline. Last suggestion that I have is honor your progress and don't get stuck in perfection. Every day that you show up is a win. Healing is not linear. It's messy. It's steps forward, step backwards, it's side shuffles, it's all the things. But every day you show up, give yourself credit. It's tough work to go through struggle and keep showing up. Give yourself time to rest, sleep, talk to the people in your life. If you have a hard time finding the things that you've worked through, the progress, you know, all those little steps to be proud of, write them down. Make a list of the hard things that you've been through, that you have survived. Sometimes we survive hard things and we don't get the gold star. Okay, we don't get the certificate with the gold star that our parents hang up on the fridge. Life doesn't always work that way. And so often we have to be the cheerleader. And so if shame shows up in your life, I simply want you to remember this. You are not the only one. Shame thrives in silence. So call it out and name it. Talk about it. Know that you are not your experience or your struggle. You're probably doing a lot better than you think. And I'm so damn proud of you for being here. So thanks for joining me to talk about shame and how we can kick it to the curb. I'll see you next week for Real Talk Wednesday.